Hey, Colin, how are you?
Richard, I am better than the Steelers, I guess. So
Yeah,
there's
I
that.
wanted to practice. I wanted to see what it felt like to be a Steeler today. So I came to this meeting poorly prepared.
Do you think they're poorly prepared?
I thought they looked poorly prepared last week. I never saw anything like that in my life. I
Yeah.
don't, man, and I got to tell you, I don't even know why, because they can't. There's, it just there's the talent has to be there, but and I'm going to come back because I really want your input on that. But I watched the Devin Bush interview. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Now you're going to be upset by it, as you should be. I felt bad. I
Why?
felt bad for him. Because I don't feel like he wasn't very articulate. I
Hmm.
think that he seemed kind of really sincere though. I mean, I felt like he was just struggling and didn't want to say he was struggling. I felt bad for him. I really did.
I think I'm on your wavelength. It's one thing to lie to yourself about something and say, well, it's really not a problem. It's another thing to really not think that there's any sort of problem. And I think he's the latter of the two.
So
I
do I.
think that he thinks, well, I'm just progressing and everything's okay.
Yeah, I think
And
so too.
it's sad to see that the whole world sees something and the person in the middle of it that's living it doesn't see it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think too. And it was sad because I don't know him. Um, he seems like a different person than I thought he might be. I saw some antics off season that I didn't like, but he doesn't seem that way. He doesn't come off as brash and cocky, and he didn't come off that way. He didn't act like Juju.
Well, doesn't it seem to ring true, at least it does for me, with Devin Bush, that you learn a lot from people whenever things aren't as easy anymore. And for every single one of these guys, not every single one, but the vast majority,
Yep.
until they got to the NFL, it was pretty easy. You were probably the best player on your youth team. You're probably the best player on your high school team. You were one of the best players on your college team, or you wouldn't have progressed to this level. And now you can't, there's no more levels past this one. This is it. This is the best of the best. And whenever you might not be that best or one of the best anymore, different people react differently. Some people go into a shell, some people work harder, some people find that level where they are. And there's a top class and sort of a middle class, and then guys just hanging on. And then there are other people that are just lost and don't know how to deal with just showing up, being enough to get them by every day. And I think
Colin,
he's there.
Colin, let me ask you this:
Mm-hmm.
what did you think of him as a player in years one and the part of two?
I thought he was okay. I thought the city overrated him. I thought that his big Achilles heel, and it was always going to be, he simply wasn't tall enough. He wasn't going to be able to run with the new tight end, which is a tall receiver type tight end, and he was always going to have problems covering that guy. I thought he was a hitter and a guy that could play inside and stop the run a little bit, but the thing that he was never going to grow 4 inches. It was just never going to happen. But I thought he was more
Well,
good than bad for
well,
the effort.
as a guy that's 5'9", I, I have to say, I don't think his height hindered him. I think what I liked about him a lot was that he was fast. He was
Mm-hmm.
quick, and he represented that quickness. I mean, I'm 5'9". The high school is certainly a different level. I played middle linebacker, and I was 145 pounds because I was crazy. And I
Still are.
but but I loved it. Anyway. So, and I'm not comparing myself to Devin Bush, obviously, but I did like that part of him. I don't know what happened this year. He's getting a lot of criticism for saying, um, nobody on the Steelers is playing well, but isn't that a fact?
Well, the team collective isn't playing to the level at which they would like to. I think that Cam Hayward and the TJ Watt are having pretty good years.
They are individually.
Yes, individually. Now, there's a bigger conversation with Devin Bush, though. And this, to me, is the biggest conversation in Pittsburgh football right now outside of will Ben Roethlisberger come back. A decision needs to be made in May as he's going into his 4th year if you're going to pick up his 5th-year option. And that needs to be made in May before he plays his 4th year, much like Terrell Edmonds this year going into his 4th year where they pick up that 5th year.
What would you do?
Heck no. What has he shown going into year 4 that you'd pick him up for the year after? I would make him essentially sing for his supper and say, hey, you got 1 year to prove it, and then you're going to be able to field offers from everybody. But we can't make a commitment to you right now going into year 4 for 2 more years because you haven't shown it for the first 3. There's just no way.
I agree with that. I think it's a little harsh about the first 3. I think year 1 he had a pretty decent year. So I think that's a little harsh, but understandable. I get what you're saying. But regardless of how many good years he had or didn't have, this isn't the time to renew him in a long-term deal, right? So I agree with that.
It can't be. Now, there's something bigger at play, too, if you don't mind. You have, let's say Devin Bush peters out. Devin Bush, Jarvis Jones, the kid from Artie Burns on the corner, and Terrell Edmonds. 4 first-round defensive players in the recent future that most certainly haven't lived up to being first-round guys. That's a problem. As much as this staff has been able to identify receivers, they seem to find receivers playing somewhere out on the street and go find them, and then all of a sudden they catch 50 balls. 4 first-round defensive players that haven't lived up to top billing. There's a common thread there.
Yeah, let's go through them again. Artie Burns,
Devin Bush, Jarvis Jones, and Edmonds, all in the first round. Think of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's really not a lot to say about that.
No.
I mean, there's really not. But, there's been a lot of we've gone through some really crazy times. I mean, right now, what do you have, 75 NFL players with COVID?
Yeah.
It's a lot of things. A lot of people are down. And that should allow other people to step up and fulfill that number 1, I would think. But, yeah, I mean, you're going to a bigger conversation that I tend to steer away from. But, I mean, is Kevin Colbert coming back?
Would you? Let me ask you this, because this is a conversation where you don't necessarily have to make that choice and say yes or no, but you can have a philosophical conversation, which I know that you love these kind of conversations. No, you really can. Do you? And it's applicable to any business. That's why I like having these conversations with you. Do you want to foresee the overhaul and the new thing if you're right on the cusp of maybe it's time to get out? Or do you get out and let somebody else oversee the new thing in the overhaul? That is to say, there's going to be a new quarterback. There's going to be a new philosophy. They're going to do new things on offense. Let's say Ben Roethlisberger says, you know what, 4 more games, I'm done. I'm finished. Is it smart of Kevin Colbert to go out the door with him? Or does Kevin Colbert stay and see that next quarterback? Because if he does stay for that next quarterback, one would think he needs to see it through at least a couple years. What do you do in a business?
Well, I don't think you can really make that a business conversation as much as you can a personal one. I don't know what his exit strategy is. I'm sure he has one. Pretty smart guy. So I don't know what his exit strategy is. I don't know if he wants to be here. I don't know if obviously I think we want him to be here, at least the ubiquitous we of the Rooneys and the Mike Tomlins. It's a pretty tight group. So I think that everybody would agree they would like him to come back. Now, there's a lot to be said for new blood, but then when you look at people like the New York Jets, they've tried new blood and, and they have just failed miserably. But we're not the New York Jets, and we have ownership that's so much more consistent than that. The consistency is what the Steelers thrive on. And sometimes you have to live and die by that same sword, right? Because we don't make massive changes. We don't go out and pick up, free agents, which is why the Minka acquisition was really a surprise to a lot of us. And I think Minka will prove to be okay. But we tend to not make those big jumps. And that's served us well, and it's also hurt us.
If I'm Colbert, I'm out the door with the quarterback because would be tied to a whole new philosophy and something totally different coming in. And I would just say, we had a great run. Why not time it out where I just head out with you and leave this for someone else?
So let's ask this question. So I would do that if I had a capable, somebody I had trained, somebody I had brought along that I knew could pick it up, but maybe a younger version of me. Because there are younger versions of me right here with me right now. And sometimes I think, wow, like John, I'll call John and I'll say, tell me your perspective on this, because I've got 20 years on them, right? So I might think differently. My son, I say, tell me what your take is on this. I could be completely wrong and disagree, but it's a very different perspective. So, and I like that perspective. And I think somebody like Kevin Colbert would respect that also. Who do you think then would backfill him?
This is something that's interesting to me. I think the new way of running a football organization isn't with one guy. I think it's with a panel, so to speak, with a caucus, with three different people, three different people. And I think they have three people that they could all elevate to working as a team. And that would be Omar Khan, Brandon Hunt, and Art's son, Danny. And that's three people that would essentially fill the void of one general manager and all use their expertise to funnel in what was formerly one job. I think we're in an antiquated world if we think that every old job needs to be filled by just one. Sometimes it doesn't need to just be streamlined into the VP of this. Maybe it's a couple people that do that and you fracture off the duties.
Okay, very interesting. I don't know Brandon Hart. Who is that?
Brandon Hunt.
I don't know.
The pro player guy that has been there for a long time, local guy from here, is in charge of scouting and developing and looking at the other pro players around the NFL. He's responsible for the Minka trade and said, now's the time to pull the trigger, bring him in. Also does a little bit of college scouting, but mainly cross-checks and cross-references the pro players when they're ready to make a trade, when they're ready to make an acquisition. He scours the other team's practice squads and says, here's a guy we could bring in and help out. And he has been sort of groomed in a front office role for a long time.
Okay, so then, because we have a couple things going on here, I didn't mean to go down this road, and I apologize for it, but so a couple different things going on. First of all, structurally, linear, non-linear, one person, three people. I want to come back to that. Secondly, I would be really disappointed if Omar Khan didn't get that job, because he's put the time in. He's been Kevin's underling, his tutor, just brought him along, and I know he's probably had other offers along the way. And I think that, like Keith Butler, Keith Butler stayed behind Dick LeBeau for so long because that was the agreement, the continuity. And I would hope that Omar stays also. But, Danny Rooney has the right last name.
Right? Oh, for sure.
So now I don't know him. I've heard great things about him, but I don't know him, and I don't know what age group he would fall. So I don't know if he's younger than, and the reason that's important is Omar gets the job, brings Danny up behind him. Danny becomes Omar. Omar becomes Kevin. And I think, go ahead.
He's not yet 40.
Okay. So you see, that paradigm kind of works with that scenario, with Omar moving up to Kevin, Danny moving back to Omar's position. And I think that looks like it works in a traditional structure.
What if I told you that the sharpest football man of those three was Brandon Hunt, and everybody will tell you that, though?
What do you mean? By an evaluation of talent?
Yeah, in walking out at the Senior Bowl and going and looking at a trade potential and looking at a college scout and saying, that's the best player. And he has a track record of doing that, and that's who Kevin has relied on a lot of times to be his right-hand man there.
Well, then I'm going to turn it right around on you and tell you then he's responsible for 4 failed first-round picks.
What if I told you he was responsible for bringing Minka Fitzpatrick here?
Yeah, I'm all in. Well, but 2 weeks ago,
drafting for pushing Freiermuth, for really pushing the Steelers on the running back and for doing some other things defensively and bringing some guys in that they actually like.
Listen, I think he's probably a great guy, but you and I could have pushed the Steelers on Najee. It didn't take somebody. I mean, that we had a strong lead. We had an opportunity for a first-round pick who also happened to be the greatest athlete available at the time. So we chose that. So I can't give him a lot of kudos for that. And I can't really give him a lot of criticism. I'm just playing devil's advocate.
No, I get it.
And so, your best thing is your worst thing. So, yeah, he can be good and great at evaluating, but that's still a job that needs to be filled when Omar moves up and when Danny Rooney moves up. You still need the Brandon Hunts of the world, right?
So let's get back to leadership by committee when you're done.
Yeah, but okay, let me go there.
Yes, because you told me to remind you. You said to remind you.
Okay. Absolutely cannot succeed by running an organization by committee. Absolutely cannot.
Iron fist, Richard Bazzy.
It can't. I'm not an iron fist. I do what you say. I do run this organization by committee, but not a committee. But it is. I do not ever do anything that we haven't all agreed on. I won't do it. And I get their buy-in, and we talk about it, and we structure it. And if it doesn't seem to go the right way, we redo it and we rehash it. But ultimately, one person has to make that decision. There has to be one person. Pardon me?
You have veto power, pretty much.
Yes.
And that's important. You think that ultimately it needs to hang in the balance of one person making the ultimate decision.
Because that one person, for example, there may be people that don't see my long-term vision as I do. And maybe they have a different perspective of what that vision is. There has to be one person that keeps it on track. And I really believe strongly in that. I believe leadership by committee is a disaster. But you see, there's something called servant leadership also, which is what I tend to lean towards. Servant leadership is pretty much what you're saying. But it's not three people with equanimity. It's not three people that have equal power. It's not. There needs to be one person, but servant leadership is with involving everybody. And
this is fascinating. It's far more fascinating than talking about the offensive line. It really is because it's all that you realize through all of this, Richard, is this football team, just like the rest of corporate America, is a power structure and at times a power struggle. And you have to strike the right balance.
Well, that's a great analogy. That's a great analogy. Yeah. That really is. That's a great analogy. I'm excited by the future with the Steelers. I think that Mike Tomlin is here as long as he wants to be here. I was completely blown away by the first half of last week's game. Oh. I couldn't believe it. And I couldn't believe Troy Aikman went on a limb as far as he did. I've never heard any play-by-play or color guy. I've never heard anybody attack a team and put a team down like he did. I've never heard that.
And it was embarrassing. If you're a Steeler, it was well-deserved, and it was embarrassing if you're a Steeler.
So, but let me ask you a question because I don't know the X's and the O's. Why? What the heck happened?
I just think they got manhandled on both lines. They just got beat up on both lines, especially on the defensive side. And, it's really twisting into focus, and it's almost like out of sight, out of mind, so we don't mention it much anymore, is Stephon Tuitt's a really good football player.
He is. And a good person.
And, yeah, for sure. And they just miss him so much, and he's irreplaceable. And they tried a bunch of different things, and they haven't been able to find anything to help. And it's a big problem.
So that goes back to your personnel hiring person, where, maybe
there aren't that many good football players.
No, come on. There's 1,600 of them. They got to be good. There's, you play with your heart. You cannot rate heart. You watch the two running backs for Green Bay. These guys play with their heart. I don't know who I was watching the other night that just put a perfect hit on the receiver that caught the ball. Just a perfect, like, man, right on the numbers, just perfect. And so that's basics, right? Oh, here's the other thing I didn't like. This is a completely random statement. When you talked about players that were the best, from Pee Wee football to high school football, blah, 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 blah. Did you watch the Cardinals game the other night?
Yes.
Did you get sickened by the amount of times you watched Kyler Murray play that video when he was a kid, leveling the other kid?
Yeah. What do you think?
I wanted to throw up, and I wanted to grab him, and I wanted to say, "Stop it, man! Just because you were good then means nothing. Why are you showing us this? You embarrassed that poor kid. Leave it alone."
It was a bit much. But I will say this before we pick the game and get out of here. We have to be – it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be a good decision and everybody fall on their feet and it be a great thing. We can still find comfort in James Conner finding a good place and doing well, right? It doesn't have to be – does it have to be we don't like him because he's not playing here in town anymore or somebody made the wrong decision? I feel good for him. I don't know if it was ever going to work here.
Yeah, I'm not a James Conner fan. No, I'm not. As a person, admire, respect, love as a person. I was one that said I didn't understand how he could be an NFL player.
Oh, I agree with you. I agree with you. As a person, I'm totally with you. Everybody wanted to drive him to the airport and run him out of town. I'm not debating you there. I'm just saying he's found a way to make it work. And
he has, and I'm so happy for him. But then comes back to, the Steelers' problems have been developing for a while. This isn't new, right? The running game, 3 years we haven't had a running game? So then what does that say? 3 years we haven't really had a great offensive line. Some of the decisions who's the guy that went and left and went to Baltimore? I don't think he should have left.
Yeah, Villanueva. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, was he the best? But here's the thing. How many are the best? How many are really going to be out of 53 players? You can't have 53 first-round draft picks. So you have to be able to coach them up. You have to be able to have your processes and your structure and your play calls, which comes back to the coordinators, right? Then you look at your coordinators and you wonder, some of the, honest to God, some of the plays, 3rd and 5, we're throwing it 3 yards. Come on.
I know.
I mean, it just makes me crazy.
4 games left. Tennessee this weekend, 1:00 on a Sunday. I love to be optimistic. I can't pick the Steelers. I don't know how I can. Richard, I don't know how I can. So I'm going to pick – I think they'll lose 23-20.
Yeah, I love Tennessee's head coach. He is blood and guts. He is roll up your sleeves, let's rumble. I can't bet against him either. And honestly, I'd really not bet against Tennessee if the running back was playing. But, the quarterback, we always struggle with that quarterback. Always.
Yeah, and, it's trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it is trouble. I don't see great things happening. We are at home.
Yes.
But it does scare me a little bit. I don't pick the Steelers.
Oh, well, there we go. It's been another great week. We're already into almost Christmas time. Man, it is
kids excited.
Oh, they can't get enough. They just
really?
Choral concert they have, then Christmas, then sitting around, then after a day and a half of Christmas vacation, it'll look like Mike Tyson and Bone Crusher Smith in our living room. It'll just be a boxing match for 5 straight days. So there you are. So they'll be excited. They'll be excited to beat each other up for 6 straight days. So there you go.
Well, Merry Christmas.
We've made it again. Next week, we'll figure it out. Great stuff. And go Steelers, I guess.
Ooh, that didn't sound very good. Okay. Not very heartfelt.
No. All right, Richard.
Okay. Thanks, Colin.